Secretariat, and at, at at the moment I'm the chair of the board of governors, which essentially means I work with member states to coordinate their positions and to advance them within the common framework of the Commonwealth. It's something that rotates every 2 years. You have a different chair of the board, and it fell to the Caribbean this time, and in their wisdom or lack thereof, they chose me to be their representative this time around, and so I'm doing that until June of next year.
Wow, that's exciting. So with all of these roles that you have, obviously we fell into COVID last year. How did that affect your roles that you're doing presently? And you know, what changed? How did you have to adjust?
I think it's simply moving online, because even one of the things that we were able to do since last June was to map out a protocol for us to go into the office, because we didn't go every day, but we were going on specific days. Each member of staff would, I thought that individuals are senior and mature enough to know the work is to be done. And so we say, okay, fine, given the concerns that everybody would have, let's not all be in the office at the same time, but we will make sure that we have the office is covered and we continue to do what we need to do remotely. And then when we need to go into the office, we would. And so we have been doing that since June of last year.
Okay.
And so it was simply a question of reconciling that, it's not business as usual. You move what you can online. And one of the things that we did very early is we moved the consular process online. So individuals who needed to get passports renewed, they needed their travel documents and so forth. We had that done online. So if you would download the application form, you then do what needs to be done, you submit it to the officer online. The officer would then look at it and say, if this is in order, if not, you get the advice that is required. And then once that is complete, and the officer is satisfied that it is indeed a complete application, you send it in, and then we'll take it from there. So we had that mechanism in place, and so we continued to work. But the most wonderful thing about the lockdown is that I actually could hear birds singing in the morning.
That's the one thing that I said, that I think there were many parts to lockdown that have been advantageous, and I think that we need to appreciate. And one is that of, change also. We were able to see blue skies and birds singing. We haven't heard that for absolute years.
Exactly.
So it was a welcome change. And what about how about your family? Tell us about your family actually also, and how they coped in lockdown.
I think
about your family.
I think they enjoyed being at home for a period of time until everybody started getting a bit of cabin fever. But I think they enjoyed it, and I was very pleased that for the children, the school was quick to move learning online. And so I was hearing things about Edmodo and then Google Classroom, and so everything was being delivered electronically. And so they were doing sit-ups here in the living room. They were doing burpees and running around and playing football. So even the PE that they would have done normally, they ended up having to do it in at home and so on, and continue to have education. But the most important thing is that we were together. We had an opportunity to camp out in the living room and just spend time together. So I think it was a good thing, all in all.
Did you take up any other crafts like what I did? I bought a whole crafting set that I haven't actually decided to touch yet. Lots of people did other things, took on training, did every other extracurricular things. And I mean, I know you do your poetry, and we'll touch upon that shortly. But was there anything else creatively that you did during the time?
No,
if you had time.
Well, I'd been flirting with a short story that I'd been working on, and I think during that time I was able to complete that short story that I had been working on. and I did a bit more reading, and but nothing artistic. But I was able to read and write a bit more during that time.
Okay. Bear with me a second. Sorry, I've just had something barking outside. That was just absolutely taking the noise out here. Sorry, it's gone now. Anyway, sorry, as I was saying. So everybody kind of did some other different bits and pieces. You've just explained what you've done also. And tell me about your family in London. Tell me about your family.
Well, I have 3 children. Two boys and a girl. I like to say that I blossomed late, and so my kids are still relatively young. They range between 9 and 13. So still primary school. The eldest is heading off secondary school. My wife is from Thailand, and I think during the lockdown she was sort of like a glue in a sense, keeping things together. And so it was, while I continued to do my work, she was supervising the children, making sure that they stick to their online schedule and so forth. So it like I said, it was good to have the time to spend with the family. Yeah.
Well, now we're coming upon the end of lockdown, hopefully, but now we're hearing it's going to be delayed another 4 weeks. I can't believe that. Yes, just when we were seeing like a sign of green shoots, they've just shot us back down again.
Yes, I read something about that this morning, and I think because they said that the R number is now between 1.4 and 1.8 or something like that. I read it, and that I like to just monitor the cases, and I noticed Thursday, Friday you had over 7,000 cases, and then yesterday I see something saying over 8,000. So to me, it might just be out of an abundance of caution, and it's it's understandable, but I know so many of us have been excited about the prospect of life getting back to normal, or whatever that is, and there might be some, a little bit of, a huge amount of disappointment for some people.
I think so. Now, you spoke about doing everything with technology online in terms of applications for passports and things. Do you think it will stay that way after COVID? Do you think it has made life easier for people to do these applications online without literally going somewhere and being face to face? Would that element stay, or would you require them for it all to change after lockdown eases?
I think there might be a bit of a hybrid, because there's some cases where you have a difficult application, and you may want to see the person individually in person. But then I think when you look at sometimes the cost of commuting, the difficulties with the legendary London traffic, I think if people can use this facility and are comfortable with it, I think I would like to see it staying in place, but hybrid, in the sense that if you need to come in, you do, but if you don't have to, then you continue to do it, because it saves time all around.
I believe so also. I mean, I'm a big lover of technology. It can fail you at the best of times. Like today, it's failed me on Facebook to go out. But at the best times, it's out on YouTube at the moment. But at the best times, it does help. And especially when you've got the older generation that can't get around London. London is not known for being, disabled or old people friendly. So it's difficult for people to get to places, and the lengths of, where you have to walk to get into somewhere. So I, for one, would embrace something like that. If all embassies could start adopting that, it would make our lives so much more simple. But I do understand, the technicalities of always not having someone there, and that they will need to come in now and again. Now, I think you've spoken enough about your High Commissioner duties and your education, your background and family life. I'd like to delve into your poetry a little bit. Because, often, you meet esteemed people and you don't realize that they are just normal people also, and they do have extracurricular activities, and yours happens to be poetry. Yes. Now, I had to read up a little bit about poetry in order to be able to talk to you. So I had to I looked up what is poetry. And this statement came out. Poetry is a type of literature that conveys a thought, describes a scene, or tells a story in a concentrated lyrical arrangement of words. Poems can be constructed with rhyming lines and meter, the rhythm and the emphasis of a line based on syllabic beats. Poems can also be free form, which follows no formal structure. So that was just a definition of what poetry is. And the definition of poetry is literally work in which the expressions of feelings and ideas is given intensity by the use of distinctive style and rhythm, poems collectively, or as a genre of literature. All right, so I'm going to go into it a little bit more. And what I actually read was that some of the very first forms of poetry was found way back in Africa, believe it or not, which was quite interesting to read. Yeah, during the 25th century BC. That was the earliest forms of poetry that had been found. So it traces back to Africa, but they don't teach us that at school, do they? They talk about Williams Wordsworth and all the other poets that we need to talk about. So poetry, it's a passion of yours. You've written 4 books on poetry. Tell us how you got into poetry.
Well, it's how do I think when I went to France, one of the another fascinating things, because there were quite a number. I was in this room. It was the walls were actually painted gray.
Yeah,
and it was a relatively small room. It had a bed, a desk, a sink, and cupboards, and a few shelves, and that was it. And here I am in a new environment. All of my networks absent, and just being inundated with thoughts and feelings. And so I think the first poem I wrote then was called Four Walls.
yeah.
It says life stands still, because in a sense you're in this room, and everything else just seems to stop, and nothing happens except you being in that space. And so I think I started writing back then, and since then, I recall I continued to write, and I just kept it hidden away. But then, while I was at Birmingham University, the Foreign Office had this brilliant idea to host a prose and poetry competition, and so I thought, okay, fine, I would enter. And so I wrote a poem called "Culture Shock: Reign Over Birmingham." And to my surprise, I get a letter from the Foreign Office saying that my submission had won first prize. And so I thought, okay, I might be onto something. And so I a few years after that, I decided to publish.
Oh my gosh. So did you study poetry at all, or was it just the competition you entered and you just, for the love of it, you just started writing poetry?
I didn't study poetry as, say, somebody who would do literature and focuses on poetry, but I'd done some work because I had studied French West African literature. I studied La Négritude with Léopold Sédar Senghor from Senegal, Aimé Césaire from Martinique, and I did French West African, Caribbean, Latin American. I did some like Nicolas Guillen of Cuba and so forth. So I was aware of poetry, but I don't know if that in any way informed my passion, or it was simply, for me, poetry was lived feelings, experiences.
It is. And, you've got your own website, and it's called Verbal Photography.
Yes.
Can you explain the term verbal photography?
For me, my poetry is about camping on people's shoulders, walking in the crowd and stepping out of the crowd and taking snapshots, having conversations and taking snapshots of people's experiences. And so that notion came up. In a way, I'm a photographer, but I'm just transferring or transmitting the images in words, and so this is why I called it verbal photography.
Okay, I love that term, verbal photography. It really does suit the poetry that you're actually doing. So you've written 4 books.
Yeah, I've published
And
4. Yes.
you've published 4. Sorry, I should say. Can you tell us the names of these books that you've published? I know I've got one, which is Memories in Serenade.
Yeah, the first one I did was Whispers of Silence, and that was way back in the day after I had gotten the first prize from the Foreign Office. And then after that, I did Memories in Serenade, which you just spoke about. And then I did Breakfast with My Fathers, and then Chasing Footsteps.
Okay. What was? Did you have a meaning behind the names for some of these books that you published?
Yes, for Whispers of Silence, I think the first one, again, it was me channeling those moments in my life where it was just me trying to make sense of the stillness, the silence, everything that was happening around me while I was in France, when I came back, and so forth. Then when I did Memories in Serenade, I thought, it's like having taken that journey where from silence to where your thoughts, there's a certain harmony. And
Yeah.
so I first think of it memoria en sonata. So I was thinking about it in Spanish, and then I just said Memories in Serenade, because I felt the movement. And then I came a few years later to Breakfast with My Fathers, and it's homage to my biological father and my father-in-law, and hence Breakfast with My Fathers. And so I was trying to not recapture, but perhaps capture some of the memories that I had with my father, and also with my father-in-law, who I met in 2002. And then Chasing Footsteps, it was my last one. And in a sense, having had that journey, there was a sense of trying to regroup and bring some of these things together. But then you realize that many of these things you just have to let go. So you find yourself, if you want to put these things in order, if you want to order your life, you will be chasing after some footsteps, and very often you find yourself going nowhere. So I thought that would be a good way to capture the sentiment.
So are all these poems based on experiences that you've had, according to what you were? Say, for example, Breakfast with My Fathers. Are these poems? I didn't have a chance to actually have a look at that particular book, but is it based upon conversations with your fathers, or everything that's happened around them as them being an influence in your life?
No, yes and no, but mostly no, because one of the things I've noticed is that most people, when they read a poem, there's an immediate assumption that it's autobiographical, and so they say, "Ah, this is something in the author's life." And I often tell the story of this person who when having read the Breakfast with My Fathers, wrote me and said, "Oh my, I feel as if I had failed you. I didn't realize you were fighting with so many demons." It's called verbal photography because, in large measure, of course, there's a tinge of my experience, and my view of the world will inform how certain images are portrayed and so forth. But it's largely about capturing other people's experiences, and it's vicariously living through other people, taking their experiences, merging them with mine, and then trying to write something that I think captures that story.
Yeah. I mean, if I talk about, I've got a couple of favorite poems in there, and that's because they actually kind of resonate with myself. And one of the first ones I saw, this one was called Hug Me Once, because who doesn't like to be hugged? And it says, hug me once, you'll hear my light heart smile. Twice, you'll see it breathe. Hug me again, and you'll feel my hands grow weak. like my mind, surrendering to a single moment, as my fears become prisoners and captors, surrounded within thin walls of floral lemon scented perfumes engraved on my jacket. Hug me again, but be careful that my imagination does not steal your embrace or dance around the room like children warmed by gifts. Before I can warm my eyes' imagination, to yell orders out loud to my heart's ears, to teach them the power of stillness. I thought that was just wonderful. It almost encapsulates how you feel when someone's actually hugging you. You know, your heart does smile. You know, you feel it. You feel that passion. You think, oh, I feel safe now. You know, and your hands do grow weak. You know, you could be, you know, if you've had an argument, let's say with your partner, and they hug you, and all of a sudden, you know, you kind of let go of the anger, and your arms drop. So it was quite a couple of powerful verses into, you know, how you actually feel when you have that hug. And so look, another one. What was the other one I had? The beckoning. So this one's a little bit long, but it's often a thought, I think, that goes through all of our heads, what happens to us. And when my turn beckons me to pass the torch, will I go slowly with wits about me sharply focused, or shall I be plucked unknowingly and unwittingly all too quietly from a deep sleep in this blessing of a wretched earth that houses my life? When time seeks me out for an appointment with destiny, will I be fugitive from the disease, or the recalcitrant beneficiary of physical and mental ailments, depriving me of peace within God, friends, and foes? When time finally comes calling me home, shall I appear like the thief into a wide open heaven, or shall I appear hungry, emotionless seas swallow me, or shall dark, unfriendly forests consume me amid thirsty fires? What will be my legacy? What comic memories would I concoct in the minds of familiars? What images conjured or extinguished by the thoughts of me? When goodbye draws near and life journey meets its destination and informs me of its resolve, will man's genius, machines, money, and science silence the important power of fate? What thoughts will be mourned in the shadows of strangers, relations, and friends, reminding me of my minutiae? When the time comes, I pray me ready, better prepared for death than I was for life. I really, really like that. I really enjoyed that, actually. It just kind of, you know, and it's sad. We shouldn't think of our death and what's going to happen, but at times you do. And it's really funny, you know, what thoughts will be mourned in the shadows of strangers. I've often thought, what would people think of me? What are they going to say about me when I go? Is it going to be good things or bad things? So, you know, those were my two favorite ones in those. And I don't know if you had any favorites of yours from some of the ones that you've got, or any that you want to read.
I think I'll read one. It says, "And I miss their laughter.
Yeah.
I lie awake listening to them sleep, and I miss their laughter. I recall their tantrum-ignited feet, infectious demand for attention, and viral chance to get what they want extinguished only by this slumber, and I miss their laughter. In the still, restful darkness, I reminisce on the daytime when they raced to the kitchen, dragging me behind them, shouting their brand new moniker, Daddy, as though they invented it and owned the copyrights. And I miss their laughter. I think of them scratching the furniture, inscribing their manifestations on the white walls, proclaiming rights to everything in sight, making nerves fray and patience thin. And I miss their laughter. I peeked attentively into the aging darkness and felt their love. I touched their gentle breath to keep them close and prayed for morning to come sooner, that they wake and remind me again why each night I miss their laughter."
Oh, I love that.
This is personal, yes, because I recall, you know, one night we were all, you know, I put the kids to bed, and you know, after saying, okay, come on, time to go to bed, and they, you know, wrestling and making all the noise, they suddenly just went out like a light. And then as I lay there looking at them or trying to locate them in the darkness, I realized, you know, all the noise during the day and my complaining that you be quiet, keep it down, when it's not there, I missed it.
That's always the case, isn't it? It's
Exactly.
all the
Yeah.
children. Sometimes you want them to go away, and as soon as they've gone away, you're like, the house is far
You
too quiet. When are they coming back?
you want them to come back. Yes.
So
Yeah.
how often do you write poetry? Do you write every day, or is it just as and when it comes to you? Or
I think somebody had asked me once, where do I find time to write? And I said, instinctively, time finds me. Because I might go one day and I would probably, something happens or it's a brilliant day and I could sit and write 6, 10 poems. A week, 2 months would pass and nothing. So it's all about the moment, I guess, and the inspiration. I recall one day going into the garage and I met this gentleman and he opened the door and I started, he said, good morning. And I noticed he had a heavy accent. So I said, do you speak Spanish in Spanish? And he said, yes. So then we started talking and it turned out that he had moved from South America to Spain. Things didn't work out too well in Spain. He came to the UK and he was working as a janitor. But he had a master's in social care and had
oh,
worked
wow.
as a masseuse. And then I, I got to my office and I wrote a poem, Tell Me Your Story. Because we don't take time. We look at people and we form
Assumptions.
impressions and we make assumptions that we know them. This is who they are. This is what they represent. But we don't take time to hear their story. And so that poem came to me, and I think a few from that because it just reminded me of how fickle we are as human beings. And then these assumptions and stereotypes we just hold on to and prevent us from really learning new things and learning things from these new people we meet on the street or in along the path of life.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated with people. Probably one of the reasons why I do chat show hosts and presenting. I love talking to people. I love talking to different people and diverse. And even, when I worked in banking and I worked in those big offices, and I'd often be there when the cleaners were coming around. And more often than not, people don't always engage with the cleaners or the people that they think are not worthy to talk to. And they were the most interesting characters in the office and had
Mm,
by far the most interesting stories. And not all of them are cleaners because that's all they can do. Sometimes it's all they can get to do, as opposed to, like you said, this person, had education.
mm,
And so, I think, as you said, we as a society can be very fickle and look at people through, some lenses, not even filtered, actually, just lenses that blind us and
mm,
cause us to make assumptions about people, and therefore stops us from learning about other cultures and people. Um,
exactly.
and it is important, and you're getting that message out there through poetry. Some other people get the message out there through singing, art, different other
Mm,
forms. But yeah, it's all important for us to carry on and keep learning. One of the other questions I had is, do you find it cathartic to write? I mean, if you're having a particular bad or stressful day, is it something that you'll sit down and think, let me write about this? I mean, you
mm,
mentioned one story about the young lad. Is it the same if you're having a really bad day? Is writing something that you draw to?
mm. This will come as a huge surprise to you, but um, if I were to comb through my mind, it's hard for me to recall having had a bad day anytime in the recent past. It's no, I'm thinking about it, and I really don't recall having bad days. There are times when um things happen that probably can take you off your balance for a moment. But I don't know. I try to put things quickly into perspective. I remember many years ago, a friend of mine said to me, "Don't expect too much of people, then you won't ever be disappointed." And so um, that stayed with me. And so sometimes I just, I don't know, I just go with the flow. And perhaps it's is my Zen teaching, where you try to live in the moment and you reconcile things as they are and you move on. So I don't generally have bad days. I can't think of any.
Oh, well, do you know what? That's very, very lucky that you don't have bad days.
Mm.
But okay, so you just use writing as and when you come upon an experience, but it's not anything that you use as you said, you don't have many bad days.
No,
So it's not
no,
like
because
you can use it for that.
for instance, I know in Breakfast with My Fathers, I wrote I remember a poem about my mother who passed in 1998,
Yeah.
and I don't. It's not really cathartic. It's more, again, photographic, capturing the moment and representing it in writing. I don't know if it gives me any sense of release, or because I've never thought of it that way. I see my poem as just painting pictures of lived experience, and this was a time in my life which I think it was a dramatic time in my life. And it stays with me, but I record it in my poetry.
Okay. All right.
Mm.
That's beautiful, by the way. Love that. Um, what else do you enjoy doing apart from poetry? What else do you do as your downtime from the duties that you have?
You know, I like kicking a ball around with the children. I like sitting and chatting with the children. I like, I think because I've learned to subdue any, well, as far as I can recall, any of the more vagabond tendencies. I like watching a
Yeah.
nice flick, a nice movie where people beat up on each other. So I can, if I have any frustrations, I can watch other people beat on each other. So, so I like looking at movies, which most people would term as violent. I like seeing. Because then I know it's just for that 1 hour and a half, and it's done and dusted, and life goes on. So good movies is thing. From time to time, I like reading books that center you emotionally and psychologically, because um, we don't know it all. As much as we like to think we know a lot, there's so much out there, and you can learn so much from so many people. And sometimes a good book is useful. A good conversation, and it helps to add to that timber of that collectively builds the house of your life.
Okay. One of the other questions I meant to ask on poetry that I skipped past. Do you have a favourite poet at all yourself?
I don't. I think if I did, I don't think so. But if I were to choose one, I think it would have been. I probably have to choose two. It would be Nicolas Guillen of Cuba and Leopold Sédar Senghor of Senegal. Um, and Leopold wrote about negritude, and I remember learning about West African literature at the time, and looking at the the power of language to communicate so many ideas. I remember I think it was France Fanon, the Haitian writer, who wrote Le Maine de la Rose, and the power of words. I think in these writers, I think have stayed with me. But I don't have a favorite because I'm a bit of a let's call it an intellectual coward, in the sense that I feel if I delve into other people's poetry, it's going to infect how I write poetry, and so I try not to become too much of a involved in other writers' work.
Okay.
I don't know if that
And
makes any sense.
it does. It makes complete sense. You don't want to convolute how you're thinking or how you're writing about poetry by engaging in other people's works, because it
Mm,
can have a direct influence sometimes. It's a bit like speaking. You
mm,
start speaking, when you're in another company, you almost nearly mimic the language that somebody else is speaking. Sometimes it can have a
well,
direct
yeah.
influence over you. So I totally understand. Do you ever get any difficulties writing your poetry? Do you get any stumbling blocks, or does it just free form and flow out?
I think I think the stumbling block for me is sometimes I look at the poem, and I think I then have to self censor, because because the the fact that everybody is going to make the immediate assumption that it's autobiographical. I
Yeah.
look at and I say, okay, maybe I have to change the structure here. I have to change the way this is said, so that people don't make the assumption. Because, like for instance, I wrote one recently which says it might be love, and then somebody contacted me and said, "Aha, there's a young lady, a new lady in your life." And so when I'm looking at my own writing, I have to try and be honest with the images and the imagery, the metaphors, the story that I'm trying to tell, but at the same time mindful that a reader could misconstrue certain elements, and that can be a bit awkward. So that is the only difficulty, I think.
Yeah. Well, we've spoken quite a bit about your poetry. Thank you so
Mm.
much. We have a limited time left, but I want to kind of reserve that time to speak about the beautiful island of St Kitts and Nevis. Now,
Yes.
it's so unfortunate because I was supposed to go to St Kitts last year.
Mm.
Um, in my other kind of life, I go around to carnivals. My mother was from Trinidad. So I'm used to carnivals, and obviously in London, and I used to write about them and travel around to different islands. And one of my
Okay.
biggest problems was that everybody used to go to Trinidad or Barbados and leave out all the other smaller islands. So one of my missions was to actually kind of promote the smaller islands and their carnivals. And the next one I went to Bermuda, and the next one I was on my list was St Kitts. Then COVID hit. So,
Mm. Yes.
seeing as though I can't get there for a little while, can you tell us about this beautiful island of St Kitts and Nevis?
Well, I think you missed a wonderful opportunity, and I hope once the COVID dust passes, you will certainly make it. You promise yourself, and you get there.
I
Um,
definitely will.
you know, I think I remember somebody had said to me that patriotism is the refuge of scoundrels, because we all become extremely patriotic when we move from our countries. But I think having had the opportunity to go back and forth to represent St. Kitts and Nevis, each time I'm always for some reason seeing St. Kitts and Nevis in a new light, with a new pair of eyes. And so it's not about me being patriotic. It's not about me being a diplomatic salesman. It's about me going home, and in so much of my poetry, it's that sense of identity, that sense of belonging, that sense of love is infusing, and how I write and how I see the world. Because when you arrive in St. Kitts, it's almost like the island says welcome.
Yeah.
You just feel, and even the breeze that comes off the sea and bathes your face, it says to you, you belong. And on St. Kitts, then I remember I also took a boat and I went over to Nevis. And when I got to Nevis, it's almost as though the island just opened its arms and embraced me and said, welcome back, come, you're home. So
Yeah.
when you're there, you feel that sense that you are a part of something. You feel that sense of belonging. And nature was kind to St. Kitts and Nevis. I drive around the island. My brother takes me every time I go there. He drives me around, and I'm seeing the changes and so forth. And I take loads of pictures to bring back, so that I can just keep track of how things are developing, the growth. But the character, the sense of being a part of something, it's still there. And so I think, even if you're not from St. Kitts and Nevis, once you land, you will feel that sense of belonging. You will feel that sense of being embraced, and told, this is home. One of the things I like to do when I go when I'm in St. Kitts, to go up in an area called Frigate Bend, and you go over to the southeast peninsula. You can stay at one point, and you can see the Atlantic Ocean on one side, the Caribbean Sea on the other, and then Nevis just right ahead, waiting for you. And so it's just breathtaking. And you know, to be a part of that and to say this is home, a place that everybody, a Caribbean home that most people think of as as a way to rejuvenate themselves and to know that this is who you are and this is what gave you life. You have to be proud, and I am proud.
How often do you get that? How often can you get to go to St
You
Kitts
know,
pre-COVID?
um, up until COVID, I think I was in St Kitts 2 times a year at least, and you know, so I most times it was for work, but I always took a day or two, bookend my work with a day or two to visit with family, to visit the go around the islands and so on. And one of the things, the best pizza I've ever had was in Nevis. I,
Really?
I I was invited there. A friend of mine. I went across to Nevis to see an old friend of mine called Alice, and she takes me to this restaurant and orders me pizza. And it was, oh my word, this is the best pizza. And I've traveled around the globe, but the best pizza was on Nevis.
Oh my gosh, that's a revelation. Best pizza on Nevis.
Yes, for me,
Not in Italy, but in Nevis.
it was on Nevis. So if the restaurant, I think it was something grill. I don't remember the name. I'll text her afterwards and find out. But it was an experience. But you know, and if you want to just do a tour of St. Kitts, for instance, there's the old railway line which used to carry sugarcane that has been transformed into a scenic railway. You can get on the train and go around the island and really enjoy the different scenery, the different ecosystems as you go from one point to the next. You go on Nevis, you have all the inns, really they're quaint but with a certain luxury, inns and so forth, that you can find on the island. So there's a sophistication that you feel. Somebody had described it as barefoot luxury. That doesn't sound so nice, but it's like being able to appreciate some of the finer things in life. But it's democratized, that anybody who is inspired to enjoy the finer things in life can get it on St. Kitts and Nevis.
Oh my gosh. Do you know about the origins of St. Kitts? I read about it, or the how it got its name. So
Um,
apparently, oh,
I've heard different stories. But the original name that I knew as I was growing up was Liamiga, which was the name
correct.
given to it by the indigenous um, Indians that live there. But
Yes,
of course, there was a war, if you can
and
call it
that meant
a war.
fertile land, didn't it, Lumiere?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then the you had the French and the English on the island, and the indigenous Indians who hadn't died had been shipped south, I think, to places like Dominica and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But I'm told that it was on Nevis. You have Christopher Columbus, who is alleged to have discovered the island. Let's say he came upon the islands in the name of Spain because the islands were already there.
yeah,
Um, and Saint Christopher is said to be, for his patron saint, Saint Christopher.
yeah.
Um, and then you had Nevis. If you go to Nevis, Nevis Peak is always kissed by a mist, a cloud over the island, and over the main the Nevis Peak, the main mountain range in the middle of the island. And I'm
Okay.
told that it looked like snow, la nieve, and so it was coming from Spain. So you have these stories, and I don't know if yours coincide with what my history tells me.
Definitely it was. But it said, well, it said Columbus sailed past the island for the first time. He said it had a distinctive, allegedly, had a distinctive shape, which was intriguing. And I think he said it mimicked a silhouette of St. Christopher carrying the Christ child. And so,
Mm,
taken back by the likeness, he christened the island St. Christopher. So, and
mm,
then it followed by the nickname of St. Kitts.
mm.
But, and another intriguing thing, they said, I read, it said people on St. Kitts are called Kittians. Is that correct?
No, Kittitians.
Oh, petitions. Oh, my pronunciation.
Petitions, yes, yes. That always gives people a bit of a challenge. But it's you have people on
Petitions.
St Kitts are called Kittitians, and people from Nevis are called Nevisions.
Yes, that's what I've got here. Divisions and
Yeah,
petitions. Oh, I love that.
yeah, Kittitians. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It sounds like a
yeah.
profession as well. Petitions.
It does indeed. Mhm. Mm.
Right. Well, that. Oh, one of the other things I wanted to speak about, obviously, about St Kitts is obviously, tourism, and obviously, since COVID, that's obviously been severely affected.
Mhm.
How was the COVID rates in St Kitts?
I think from last year we managed to keep the cases to I think 45, and much credit must go to the government for its policies in containing it, and for the National Health Agency that had been managing the thing. But I think in just the last couple of weeks, I was reading today. We have the I think with the partial opening, I think there was a somebody who most of these cases, of course, are imported, and so we now have a bit of a cluster, and it's now becoming it's spreading into the community. But I think the track and trace program has been very effective, and they seem to be able to identify the individuals who had been infected and those with whom they have been in contact. They have been isolating them, and in the next couple of weeks, I think there are going to be certain restrictions on people's movement to make sure that you can not only identify, track, trace, identify, but isolate and contain. So I'm waiting to maybe by Monday I'll get a better sense as to where we are. But I think we I was very happy because the cases had from last year to last month had stopped at 45. We had no major hospitalizations and no deaths, but then suddenly in the last month, because of the this case, you have it beginning to spread. So we are going to have to be extremely careful. But I think in terms of first jab, we have about over 62%, and maybe about 23% or a bit more who people are fully vaccinated. So the rollout has been
Very
um,
effective.
notable. But I think, like most places, you have vaccination hesitancy for any number of reasons. So hopefully, we will get a handle on it moving forward.
I mean, by comparison, it really is still a very small number
Hmm.
of cases there, and they've been like with some of the other Caribbean islands, even including Jamaica, they've managed to try and keep the rates down.
Yeah.
Okay, in terms of travel to St Kitts, then is it open to travel to? Do you know at the moment, St
Um,
Kitts?
um, the last I heard, I think you probably have to be fully vaccinated,
Yeah,
and of course you have to still do the PCR test and show that there's no you're not a potential spreader of the virus. But it's and it seems to move in cycles.
yeah,
Once you have it under control here, then it moves to another place, and then it just keeps moving around, and so it's something that's going to keep us on our p's and q's for quite some time,
I
unfortunately.
think so.
Yeah.
But as a last note, and not to end it on COVID, what would be your message to everybody wanting to visit St Kitts?
I would say once the COVID dust settles, um, your education will not be complete until you visit St. Kitts Nevis. You have to visit St. Kitts Nevis.
I think so. That sold it to me also. That will be next on my list. But
Wonderful.
thank you so much for being my guest today. I just wanted to ensure that we could tell everybody, that they can find you on www.verbalphotography.com, is it? Or is it .co.uk?
.com. Yes.
.com, where you can find details of all the books that you've published, and also some elements about yourself also. And if you want to buy the book also, it's available on Amazon also, or via the website. Are there any last words you'd like to say, Kevin? I just want to say thank you so much for being a fantastic first guest. We've had a few technical problems in the beginning, as we do with these shows. It didn't connect to Facebook as I scheduled. It went out onto YouTube slightly late, so apologies to everybody. And I'm using a different camera, so it looks as though I'm not looking at the screen, which I am. But all these things, we'll also fix again. But I've had a fantastic time. Thank you. I hope you have too.
So have I. I thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with the audience. And technical difficulties, it's all part of life. It doesn't change the fact. But I think when I think of my poetry, I say I would like to say to people, tell me your story. We all have a story to tell, and we have to tell our stories.
Thank you. That's such an important point here. And everyone should take the time to listen to other people's stories as well. That goes on top. Well, Kevin, thanks once again. I'm going to end this live broadcast now. Thank you, everybody who tuned in and watched for Discussion Point today with His Excellency Kevin Issac. Thank you so much.
Thank you.